Today's podcast includes commentary from a guest speaker. Neither the RIA Compliance Collective nor RIA Compliance Concepts is affiliated with the speaker or the company he or she represents.
Whether your advisory firm has 1 or 5 people, compliance will always be an issue. RIA Compliance Concepts is more than just another service provider. We truly care about seeing our clients prosper. That's why we started our podcast, the RIA Compliance Collective, providing up-to-date compliance guidance. We're passionate about doing our job so you can focus on doing your job. We understand regulatory compliance like the back of our hands, from full-service RIA registration to annual compliance reviews and everything in between. We're here to get you there.
Welcome back to the RIA Compliance Collective. I'm your host, Ivan Barreto. I also have my co-host, Colin O'Brien, with me today. How's everything going, Colin?
Great, Ivan. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm just a little bit low energy today. I've been up since 1 o'clock because my brother-in-law had his kid yesterday, which is great things for our family. But I'm dragging a little bit. I had an energy drink, so I hope it kicks in soon. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again today. We have an exciting topic to discuss. Today, we're going to go ahead and discuss email and social media archiving solutions. We get this question all the time with our clients that either have ramped up their business where they had to bring another investment advisor representative or operational personnel to join their practice to help them manage with their practice. And we get this question all the time about what solutions do I need to employ now that I have to manage and supervise other employees, investment advisor reps with their email and their social media. And so what we've done today is we brought in a guest speaker on the podcast today to help us clarify some of those common questions about archiving solutions. So we have Sue Lemm, the Chief Operations Officer of Cobalt Archive. Prior to working with Cobalt Archive, she served as a project manager for 6 years with various organizations. And she's also an avid LinkedIn social media, I guess you would say, influencer that posts several interesting topics to help advisors with their practice as far in relation to archiving solutions. Thank you, Sue, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Sue, we like to break out, just like how I built this on NPR, just kind of piggyback off, how did Cobalt Archiving get started?
Cobalt Archive was founded in 2018 by James Murray, who is the president of JDM Wealth Management. That's an RIA in Massachusetts. Cobalt Archive was actually born as a result of his experience with other archiving platforms because they didn't meet his expectations, basically in terms of function and price. So his background is that he started with the large wirehouses, later transitioned to a large independent broker-dealer where he had to take on the responsibility for archiving both communications and advertising content. And after opening his own RIA, he experienced hugely ballooning archiving costs of over 300% over 4 years. And he didn't see any additional services or tangible system benefits. So he decided to research other options, other archiving options for RIAs. So nothing really stood out as an excellent option. And he did see many drawbacks, including having to use multiple systems, teaser intro rates. A lot of the contracts were for multiple years with 90-day auto renewals. So he felt that there needed to be a better option. So what he did was he wanted to build something on the premise that archiving should be straightforward and pretty easy for an RIA to handle themselves. So Cobalt Archive was built to be a scalable platform with high attention to security details, and that would meet the archiving needs of RIA firms without pricing gimmicks or long-term contracts. So we have a lot of empathy for the small business owner RIA who needs tools to help with their compliance requirements.
Speaking of the compliance requirements, under Rule 2042, there's a whole laundry list of requirements as far as books and records go. That's the books and records rule. How does the archiving platform help meet the RIA needs for this requirement?
That is a great question. So the primary purpose of Cobalt Archive, the platform, is to capture and store original content in a format that the users cannot delete. That is also called immutable. So the books and records requirement, regardless of which regulatory body has oversight, SEC, FINRA, state, it basically comes down to capture and storage for a defined retention period. So that includes all inbound communications, outbound communications with recommendations or advice, order and account info, among other things, and also advertising communications. For example, marketing emails, website content, and social media posts. So having an electronic archiving platform, it allows for a higher level of security and a more complete body of data over, say, a paper or manual process. It allows for original content to be captured and stored, which is one of the requirements. When the storage is set up in an immutable or unchangeable format, it prohibits the deletion or altering of records, which is also required. And it's automatic. So users don't have to remember to manually document correspondence or other things on a regular basis because it's automatically happening. And because of this, electronic archives, as opposed to manual or paper-based, have a better chance of being complete and accurate.
Well, that's always important to have the accuracy as far as maintaining the various documentations that RIAs are required to maintain. And what that requirement, the books and records requirement, it kind of boils down to supervision and whether or not the RIA, aka the chief compliance officer, is provided with proper tools for supervising. How does Cobalt Archive assist with these supervision requirements?
Right. So the supervision of the stored content by the compliance personnel, whether it's one or many within your firm, is defined typically within the policies and procedures that are part of the firm's compliance manual. For example, the frequency of record review might be documented as, say, weekly or monthly. So the reporting from Cobalt Archive would be used to support this process during an examination. Within the platform, users can define search criteria to select records that need to be reviewed, evaluated, and/or escalated. For example, we've got a red flag term search that is default, comes with the setup, and it can be modified with a firm's own key terms. And those would definitely be something that would need to be reviewed on a regular basis. So we also have the ability to have workflows set up that would mimic policies within the firm, and it could automatically tag, assign, or comment on a record and escalate as defined within the compliance procedures for the firm. So digital archiving platforms in general are also useful for regulatory audits. For example, Massachusetts, which is where the president's RIA is located, states that records need to be maintained in a format permitting easy access. I'm sure that is across the board, easy access. So Cobalt Archive actually has an auditor window or a login, which provides access to an external reviewer or auditor for their specific records request, in addition to being able to print out reports.
That's a great feature to have.
Now for a short break.
Cobalt Archive, helping RIAs pass regulatory audits through compliant archiving. To learn more about Cobalt Archive, visit cobaltarchive.com.
And now, back to the podcast.
Being able to print out reports.
That's a great feature to have, especially to make basically whenever you're getting audited, obviously it can be a nerve-wracking scenario. And that seems like a great feature to have to help you segregate the requirements. Other than that, Sue, can you tell us what is unique about Cobalt Archive's platform? Is there anything else that you'd like to point out that's a very unique feature?
Sure, absolutely. So with the evaluation of other archiving platforms in the archiving space, it seemed as though a lot of the technology was older technology, older user interfaces, older fields, older screens. And what was a sticking point was that in a lot of the different applications that the president used were fields that were just not applicable to his firm's practice. And he would have to wade through these things to do his searches and so on and so forth. So Cobalt Archive's dashboard was built to be very dynamic and intuitive. So you're only going to get those fields that are applicable to what it is you're working on. We don't have a lot of extraneous items that are on the field for our customers to kind of figure out. So it allows for users to quickly find their content and also display records that may otherwise fall through the cracks. And what I mean is that we actually have a visual representation of your entire archive of all the records. And within that, you can see the different tags and the different users that were assigned to records, but you can also see records that have not been reviewed and records that have not been tagged. So within other platforms, you may have to create a search that, you're looking for a certain set of records, and you may inadvertently be filtering out records that need to be reviewed. So that is actually kind of one of the ways that Cobalt Archive closes the gap. We don't have gaps where you've got records that have not been reviewed on purpose. We also have many tiles and widgets on the dashboard that can further segment your archive content, and you can review it in many different ways. If you've got a large compliance staff, you can see what people are working on, what's been assigned. So the dashboard is really the heart of the platform. But in addition to that, we are the only platform right now that uses blockchain as a verification tool. And it actually is a perfect example of a use case for blockchain in an archive environment. So we've published a document on that to kind of give people a background on blockchain. I don't want to get too techy, but the platform creates a unique identifier that is pushed into the blockchain. And if any changes were ever made to the record, a new unique identifier would be created, which would not align. And just based on that technology, we would be able to prove to auditors and regulators that the content is original and unchanged, which is very important at this point. We do not rely on an internal timestamp as some companies do. And we also employ the highest level of security available, which is called SHA-3-512. And so those are things that were near and dear to the president's heart, security and usability. So those are two things that are very, very stand out, I guess, in Cobalt Archive's platform.
To step back to the dashboard, being a former regulator and a compliance consultant for well over a decade now, I've been in hundreds of different offices and reviewed, countless email retention systems. And I can really empathize with the compliance officers out there because some of these systems, they're not really intuitive and kind of hard to find stuff. And you're not sure if you're getting all the information that you need to be getting. And it can be confusing. And a nice streamlined dashboard that you're talking about is really important, especially in my world. But just to wrap up, kind of in a nutshell, what separates Cobalt Archive from the competitors? I know you mentioned the blockchain thing, which we're at the cusp of a new, different type of security technology here. But what else, if you don't mind going into depth, that makes Cobalt Archive unique?
So we really feel that we can do what needs to be done for the small IRAs in the space. The president is one of them, basically. And so he feels their pain points and he knows what is going to make their life easier. So it's a secure platform that's easy to learn and it's fun to use when you're using the interactive parts of the dashboard. Really easy to find your information, to find your records. And in simplest terms, we capture and store the content. We provide tools for compliance review and then produce the reports needed for audit support. So the SEC and states are requiring RIAs to archive their day-to-day activities with the investor public and with individuals that are clients that would relate to correspondence and accounts. And for those that are not clients, that would include the advertising and marketing, including website, email, and social media. So although there are other good platforms out there, we're not going to harp on anybody. We have this brand new clean user interface, transparent pricing, and we help firms meet their archiving compliance requirements. So Many firms don't need a bunch of bells and whistles that don't apply to them. And we want to kind of take the scary out of archiving and just make it a matter of fact.
That's great. And Sue, obviously, we'll have your information and the company's information in our show notes, as well as that most recent article you posted on LinkedIn about blockchain and archiving in our show notes, so our listeners can learn more about your company and read the article. So with that being said, we're going to start to wrap up here. And we basically asked this question of a lot of our guest speakers that have come on. It's just a fun question unrelated to compliance and whatnot, but just something that is just a fun question to ask. So I know I gave it to you in advance so you could think about it a little bit. What would your superpower be and why?
That is a great question. So off the top of my head, I would think I would like to fly. I think most people would like to fly. I actually hate airports, but I love to travel. So, so I think that would probably be it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, flying is pretty
Yeah. No, flying is awesome. I definitely, I think that's probably one of the most common answers that we get is people like to fly. They hate airports, they hate travel, and they would rather get from one place to the other without having any hassle. So that's one of them. Our other co-host that wasn't able to be with us today, Megan Campbell, she had an interesting one that she wanted the ability to instantly transport from place to place, similar to kind of flying aspect where she could transport within nanoseconds to, her destination with the ability to take her family with her and stuff like that. So
right, like Dr. Strange or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, but flying is awesome too. Like everybody wants to feel the sensation of flying. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, Collins, was a former paratrooper in the Army. So he knows exactly how the feeling of flying is, right?
Yeah, flying isn't the problem. It's hitting the ground is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sue, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you're probably busy just like we are, but thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us again. And just remember, we're here to get you there.
Thank you for listening to the RIA Compliance Collective. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you want to experience the RIA compliance concepts difference yourself, visit riacc.io. From mock audits to customized compliance procedures, ongoing compliance assistance, and beyond, we're here for you always. Keep listening to discover more on how you can keep your advisory firm compliant so you can focus on achieving your goals. RIA Compliance Concepts. We're here to get you there.